Hello, my name is Maureen Book, and I'm here to present the economics of ROSCAs and intra-household resource allocation by Sawan Anderson and Jean-Marie Baland. So Anderson and Baland conducted a study of rotating savings and credit associations, otherwise known as ROSCAs, which are a popular form of informal savings groups in the developing world. So these informal savings groups are formed by individual members who come together and contribute a certain amount of individual money into a group pot, which is then dispersed to each member in different months of the cycle agreed upon by the group. And these informal savings groups are particularly popular in the developing world, especially in areas where there is a lack of formal access to credit and financial institutions. And so Anderson and Baland conducted surveys and gathered data on a sample of 520 households in Kenya, and they found that 84% of ROSCA participants in the sample are women, and the probability of a woman participating in a ROSCA in their sample is 40%, which rises to 53% if she is married. So this finding was something that they wanted to explore further, which is the basis of their study. The authors also decide to adopt a conflictual household model in their analysis. So this differs from the traditional unitary household model in economic theory that assumes that there's a Pareto-efficient outcome of allocation of resources. And instead, they model conflict in their households as members have different preferences for a good, which I will explain later. So essentially their research question comes out to why do married women join ROSCAs? So their model, they argue that women use ROSCAs to protect their income from their husbands. So the couple has different preferences for this indivisible good, though the household decision-making is joint, which then leads to conflict. So female bargaining power will affect her participation in a ROSCA. This is their fundamental hypothesis, that it's this individual bargaining power which will affect one's participation in a ROSCA. And they hypothesize more particularly that the relationship between joining a ROSCA and female relative income share is an inverted U-shape. So they assume that if women have no bargaining power in the household, that they will not join a ROSCA because the funds that they would save from a ROSCA they would not be able to purchase the good that they have a preference for if they have no bargaining power in the household. But as bargaining power increases, measured by the share of income in the household, their probability of joining a ROSCA will also increase as well until they finally have all of the bargaining power in the household or all of the income share. And therefore, they would not participate in a ROSCA because if they already have all bargaining power within the household, then they would not need to protect their income and join a ROSCA. They would already be using their household savings to purchase their preferred good. In terms of data, they collected some data in 1996 and 97 from individual surveys. They looked at 520 households in a Kenyan slum, and approximately 2,300 individuals were surveyed and included in this sample. They narrowed the sample more particularly down to 344 married women, and they also collected information on ROSCA groups themselves, of which they had about 385. This is some descriptive statistics of the data. There are a number of control variables that they use in their analysis, including age, education, the household income, expenditures, household size, number of children, years in Kibera, and then native language, which all are proxies for trustworthiness, which are important for group formation. In terms of their methodology, they look at two different dependent variables of interest. So one is participation, whether or not the married woman joins a RASCA, and then two, the amount of monthly RASCA contribution that is made. They use a probit estimation and two-stage Heckman procedure. And they measure bargaining power in terms of the individual's share of the couple's income. And then they create dummy variables that are broken down into each 25% category, which will determine or support their hypothesis that there's a inverted U-shaped relationship between participation and bargaining power. So this is the first table of their results. This looks at RASCA participation, uses a probit estimation, and then you can see in the first two models, both female and couple are statistically significant indicators of RASCA participation, and the female and couple interaction term is statistically significant as well. And then in the third model, just looking at female and couples, that smaller sample, you can see that the female share of couples' income, so female bargaining power, is a statistically significant indicator, and it's nonlinear. Then breaking it down into those 25% categories of bargaining power measured in income share in both models 2 and 4, the total sample and just the sample of females and couples, you can see that they are statistically significant and positive indicators of joining a RASCA, except for the income share, which is not statistically significant. So this supports their hypothesis as well. And then this is the estimation of their results in terms of the amount of RASCA contributions that are made. The first interesting result is in models 1 and 2, the female and couple variables are not statistically significant. So this does show that female and couple or the probability of joining a RASCA is independent from the decision of how much to actually contribute to the RASCA as well. So these are two separate independent decisions that are made by women. And then breaking it down into this female income share, the bargaining power 25% categories as well, you can see that the dummy variables, in particular for the intermediate levels, about the 25 to 75% level, are statistically significant, which supports their hypothesis. So in conclusion, the authors propose a conflictual household model with differential preferences for good and consumption choices. And they find that RASCA participation does follow this inverted U-shaped relationship with a woman's bargaining power, and also the relationship with the amount of the RASCA contribution and female bargaining power also follows the same inverted U relationship. And in conclusion, they find that financial inclusion is in fact restricted by a woman's bargaining power within the household. And this is especially important in terms of policy decisions and different policies that are being implemented around the world to get women included into financial institutions. And in fact, if the policies might not be as effective, simply expanding access to women if women are prevented from entering into these financial institutions in the first place because of their limited bargaining power and empowerment within the household. Some critiques of Anderson and Baland is that their model and the data do not in particular account for potential endogeneity. There is a lot of literature in particular around how financial inclusion influences and it increases women's empowerment. So looking at the reverse relationship. And so the authors don't particularly take that into account and how the opposite relationship could also be true between women's empowerment and bargaining power and financial inclusion. And then the authors also had a very limited definition of household bargaining power. There's a lot of literature that's pointed to other measures as well beyond just income. So literature has also pointed to asset ownership, education literacy, gendered institutions or social norms, violence, and proxies for household decision making. So in particular, my research project will look at whether this conflictual household model can actually be applied in other contexts and other situations. I will expand the definition of bargaining power, particularly in an agricultural framework. And then I will attempt to address some of the potential issues of endogeneity and looking at specifically whether women's bargaining power does in fact affect her participation in financial institutions. So thank you.